Well, hello, everybody. I'm Tanner with DSG. I lead sales and marketing for the company. I've been with the firm for the past 20 years. We help B2B companies make changes to their sales strategy and enable the sales teams to make that shift. Our topic today is going to be vertical selling. So, organizations that are making the shift from horizontal to vertical specific. I'm joined by John from Fastly. And John, I'm going to let you just introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I am John Chinello. As Tanner said, I'm the head of global sales enablement here at Fastly. We're a content delivery network, so we deliver the best of the web. I have a couple of areas of focus: revenue enablement, revenue events, partner enablement, customer enablement. But I'm really excited to talk about our vertical selling and our playbooks today, which are a huge success that we've had over the last year.
That's great. So, in the next 20 minutes or 19 minutes we have left, the goal is to get really specific and you to kind of leave with just some actionable ideas around what's worked at Fastly. And so, let's start with the objectives. So, Fastly really made the bet around we're going to lead vertical specific conversations. That's how we're going to onboard new people. That's how we're going to train the current team. Why was the vertical strategy important for Fastly, John?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we were growing rapidly. We still are growing very quickly, but we have to scale that success and we have to make it repeatable. So we wanted to get deeper in those customer conversations and make sure that we're having the best impact in the time that we're spending with our customers.
Yeah, that's perfect. So let's kind of frame the picture of the vertical shift, and I'm going to describe it generically, and you can kind of add your color to it in terms of how Fastly was tackling it. But typically, when we talk about the big idea of vertical conversations, organizations are trying to differentiate by being more specialized, sell the whole solution, maybe a key vertical where they know that they're set up well to get market share. In a lot of cases, that means they've got to be a lot less generic. They got to get beyond general product conversations to really narrow use cases. And in some cases, you've got to be a bit more team-based and bring in specialists. What were some of the outcomes that were the most critical for the Fastly team?
Yeah, I mean, like what we are really trying to do is personalize those conversations, and like I said, have deeper conversations. So each industry is very different. Each leader within that industry is very different too. So an IT leader in an e-commerce area may need various things, and they could be totally different than what an IT leader in digital publishing needs. And so being able to tailor those conversations and have better outcomes comes from personalizing that conversation, identifying their value points, the problems that they're trying to solve, bring good case studies to them and show them how we can solve those problems. And then, kind of speaking in the terms of that buyer, making it really easy for them to buy is super critical.
Yeah, totally. So let's talk about the path that you chose. So we will talk a lot about how there's this kind of salespeople getting lost in the tornado of insight and information, and how do I sell by vertical? And in some cases, the path they've gone down is every territory rep's getting assigned to a single vertical. In other cases, you're having to, as a rep, sell across multiple. Which path did Fastly go down, and what have been the primary challenges that the sales enablement teams had to try to figure out around that?
Yeah, so going down path one meant specializing teams for those specific verticals. And the burden of that is getting the education and enablement in place to help those teams get deeper. So if you've got everyone kind of on the same page and kind of singing from the same songbook, you're having a good impact, but you've got to go deeper and you've got to get a depth of knowledge of that vertical, of those buyer personas, and have more valuable conversations.
Let's talk about the change vision. One thing that was interesting was that early on in our collaboration with the Fastly team, there was a lot of work to really nail where we've been versus where we're going. For example, like inconsistent messages and positioning too, there's a really unified story. What do you feel on this list was one or two of the most critical changes that had to happen? And perhaps you've seen the most acceleration, but what was most critical for the Fastly team?
Yeah, I think each one of these has its value, and all of these are really important. But I think as you align with as I was talking about personalization, as you align with the buyer's problems and identify those solutions, you're coming to um, a combined value conversation. And so you are not wasting anyone's time. You're bringing value, you're having an impact, and you're getting to the strategic value and transformation that they want to achieve.
Did you find that the you had a lot of salespeople that were already doing that, and it was just kind of a few that still had to get there, or was it a pretty small percentage, and you're trying to clone what they were doing? Kind of what was the nature of that shift?
Yeah, I'd say, we have very good sellers and everyone knows great. I think what the value of verticalized playbooks brings is the ability to kind of do it on a scalable, repeatable, consistent process. And so even a very tenured seller finds new tips and tricks. They see and they get exposed to how others have been successful, which is really critical there. And what's really helpful, like the biggest impact is your new sellers that may not have sold into that specific vertical before. They learn from the best, they learn from the experts, and they learn across all the verticals of what really, really works.
Yeah. One thing I liked about the Fastly Change Vision was just this concept of thought leadership. Like what seller, realistically, what seller doesn't want to be a thought leader? I mean,
Yeah, that's right.
we all want to
Yeah,
be smarter and more valuable. And I love that one.
right. And you want the customer to get excited when you set that meeting with them to know that it's not going to just be, oh gosh, I got to meet with John again. It's cool. I get to meet with John and Tanner and learn some more things that are going to make my business better.
One of the pillars of the approach at Fastly has been this concept of video-based training playbooks by vertical, and that a seller is getting the content, the tools, and the training to be confident and successful by vertical, where everything I need to know, everything I need to, do, what I'm going to say in a conversation, what I'm going to show, you're kind of taking the mystery out of that and giving me a framework. I'd love to just hear your perspective, even vision for the playbook approach and why it's so central to how you enable the Fastly team.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Tanner. I think playbooks are essential. Even if you start from the basics and just kind of get things down on paper, you're starting the process of getting the question answered that the seller will have. What do I do next? That's what a playbook does. One choice with playbooks is just put them out there and hope for the best. That's probably not going to be super successful. The what to know, what to say, what to show, and what to do is really important. And I did that out of order, but that's okay. All four of those pillars are really important to be able to understand, like, okay, what do I do in this situation? And then I want to be able to practice doing that. So, as we'll talk about here, I think the essentials for success is a long tail approach to playbook implementation. You have the content, you have the structure, but most importantly, you've got to get sellers kind of doing what you're asking them to do. And so they've got to put that into play and put that into practice. And so they need to know all four of these things.
Yeah. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of images here of video, and this is just a generic mock-up of a playbook.
Yeah.
We'll kind of talk more specifically about your content in a second, but a lot of images of video here. How important has video and kind of how-to videos that make it real, how important has that been in your playbooks?
Incredibly important, especially in this virtual world that we're living in right now. We need to be able to see something in action. And if I'm a new rep, for example, I want to see how that conversation should look in front of a customer. So capturing that video of what it looks like in a role play or what I call a real play situation is really important. And it's also scalable. I can go back to it as many times as I need.
I've never heard real play versus role play. Is that one free?
You can steal that one. You're allowed to use it.
I'm going to use that term. So you built a number of industry playbooks and it really laid out for sellers some of the practicalities of, here's how you engage and here's who you're targeting and here are the trends in that industry and the talk tracks. And if you're in person, here's how to lead, or well, if you're on a video call, here's how to lead a visual conversation on a video call has really become reality. Let's look at kind of an example of the kind of content you're building. And I'd like you just to give us some thoughts on how it's being used in the real world. So one thing that's very important in your playbook seems to be these talk tracks. And that for all these scenarios, verticals, audiences, you're giving sellers step by step. If you're in step 2, here's a video of one of our people real playing, what it looks like. Here's the visual, here's the talking points. here's the questions and how you tailor and transition. How are these talk tracks being used in the real world?
Yeah. So what's cool about these playbooks is that you can have them up during a call. I think that's the advantage of virtual selling is you could have stuff right there, almost like a cheat sheet in front of you. In the training sessions that we do for these playbooks, it's kind of an aha moment when the reps actually see the real play occurring. So we kind of walk through what the conversation looks like. And then they kind of start to realize that the person that's going through it actually has the talk tracks up. We're not reading them line by line. You're choosing based on how the conversation goes. It kind of guides you down a path. It's not fully scripted. We don't want it to be that way. We want them to personalize it. But it gives you the guidance and the knowledge necessary. And so with some studying ahead of time, some reading and familiarity with these and some practice, it can make every customer conversation that much better.
Yeah, totally. How are new hires using talk tracks? How does this relate to the process of getting a new hire productive?
Yeah, they need to understand what they're going to be talking about. So understanding from the trends and pressure standpoint, the buyer persona, what their challenges are, and then how we can identify the solutions. No rep should go in and puke a product up all over the customer's desk. That's never a pleasant experience. It's also a graphic experience, but uh, but you don't want to just talk about your solution. You want to make it conversational. And so we kind of teach them, how do you make this very natural? Using these talk tracks, here's a couple of suggested things that you can say to identify the solution, to talk about the problems, to understand what the customer's pain points are, and then, and only then, aligning the solution to their problems.
No, that's smart. That makes a ton of sense. Well, let's kind of talk about just connecting the dots or bringing it all together. Um, from the DSG perspective, we'll see organizations miss the mark sometimes when they're not getting the on-demand piece of it combined with the experiential. When we first started working with Fastly, it was all in person. Now everything is virtual and still experiential, but it's all in a virtual world. Plus,
Right.
managers having a role in this where they're actually reinforcing and coaching and leading their own training in combination with that. Maybe give us your perspective on these three areas and how they relate.
Yeah, Tanner, I love this slide so much because any one of these can be successful, sure, but you've got to have all three. I can't emphasize that enough. If we just do in-person events and it's currently SKO season, the first part of 2021, everyone's doing SKOs, and so we focus on what's virtual now, but those kind of experiential training events, and then we kind of cross our fingers and hope for the best. The fall off rate for that is usually not great. So having things on demand and always accessible later with tools of content management systems and the playbook platform and everything that you have should be as accessible during that training event as it was, as it can be 3 months later. But most importantly, over all of this too, is that you've got to have manager involvement. Enablement involves managers as much as it involves an enablement team as well. High performing enablement teams always involve the managers and have them reinforcing the content that's being taught, that's being delivered, that's being practiced, because that's really where the learning sticks.
Was it hard to get your managers to take on some responsibility to lead team meetings and coach and reinforce around playbook approach?
I wouldn't say it was hard. I think it means some time management. I mean, we also don't want to get in the way of making revenue goals, and so I think it takes a little bit of selling the whole "what's in it for me." By doing this, you get this much more impact out of your team, and so you want all of your team members. As a manager myself, I want all of my team members to understand the end goal, what we're trying to achieve, so that we can work together as a team. And so those managers are bought in before the training even begins. The managers are bought into what this program is going to bring to their team and how it's going to help them be high performers.
That makes a ton of sense. Let's talk about continuous enablement. I know this has kind of been a passion for you. This concept of we're always enabling. And in this case, continuous enablement is all about you're doing live virtual launches of training around a topic. Teams are challenged to make progress. They go through a training in a box with their manager. Maybe there's some success sharing. There's some sort of certification or mastery around it, but maybe kind of what's your version of what continuous enablement looks like at Fastly and why?
Again, one of my favorite slides. Enablement is a process, not an event. And so having things like we don't learn in large chunks of time, right? And that's where you get that retention issue. So as you learn content, like you're learning a new language, you're learning to do something a little bit different. And each time you're layering on more and more knowledge. It's why a college course is a semester long and not a week long. It's building upon that knowledge, putting it into practice, learning it, applying it, and then coming back and learning some more. And so the challenges, the on-demand training, the webinars, the reinforcement, the gamification, as you can do all of this, you can have some fun with it. All of that makes it stick that much more, and it becomes a long tail approach to making the enablement stick and making it really impactful.
Yeah. And I guess your sales team, most salespeople are pretty competitive. Have they responded pretty well to the idea of challenges and kind of making progress against their peers?
Oh, absolutely. We've got some super competitive folks. And so we knew we had to have some prizes involved and have some fun with it. We even had like a big splash at the end of the program, like when we were moving on to the next one, celebrating the successes of those. I think one of the biggest ways to motivate sellers is through other sellers. And so when they see the high performers taking part in these programs and winning with these programs, that's what gets them on board too.
Collaboration was key to this process. Fastly was so good at this, just getting the right people involved. Maybe just kind of speak to what collaboration looked like as it related to discovery and aligning on plays and cross-functional workshops and video and training. Kind of what were some of your observations around what made this work?
Yeah, it really took a village, to use a cliche term. It took a couple of different departments, from product marketing, enablement, training. All of our sales leadership was involved. Most importantly, we got sellers involved in the process too. And so the investment up front was making sure that we have the right consistent messaging. What do we want to go to market with? What does good really look like? How can we become aligned? Because remember, we're trying to scale this globally as well, across hundreds of people. And so it's really critical that all that stuff is put into place. The workshops, the video production, everything that DSG helped us with, all made it successful. And then most importantly was, that experiential training and everything that made it a long tail approach that I was just talking about, making all that stuff stick.
Yeah, kind of all that implementation on the back end that really continues to this day. You and I talked the other day and kind of summarized a handful of insights of what you felt like really was the most core or critical from this whole process. You may not want to read through all four of these. Maybe there's a couple of things you want to kind of summarize here as takeaways for those who are joining this session.
Yeah. So the first and the second one, I kind of just hit on pretty hard, where you've got to involve the sellers, the people that are actually going to use these things. That's super important. That's often overlooked as well. So don't forget that piece. Buyer persona identification is really important. That's where you're leveraging your marketing, your product marketing teams, understanding, again, pulling in what sellers experience as well. What are those challenges? What's the future of where that buyer and that buyer's company, where are they headed? What are they doing? How are they transforming? And how do you align with that? And then, of course, having that ongoing process with anything, I think is really important, just to make sure everything sticks and it's not just another piece of content that comes out or another training of the month, let's say.
John, this has been awesome. Thank you for taking the time to just share the Fastly story. I think some really specific, focused, repeatable insights that can be utilized by anybody that's joining this session that's trying to make the shift to vertical. And we appreciate our partnership with you and your team.
Of course. Yeah. Likewise.
All right. Thanks, everybody who joined. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tanner. Thanks, everyone.